This is Ace Coach.
Welcome to the show, Guy. It's an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Thanks, Evan.
I am looking forward to this episode because you're doing something that I love, which is basically you have your own podcast where you interview. I think there are leaders and founders and, possibly potential clients. And that is something that we're big on here. That's pretty much what we do over here. And I love it because of it's pretty much like a reference for that I think other coaches could learn from you. So we're gonna be talking about that based in this episode around that. But before we do though, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and your coaching practice. Yeah, could you, introduce yourself to our audience, tell us who you are and how you go into that line of work?
Thanks, Evie. And thank you so much for the introduction and for reaching out. It's always a wonderful pleasure having, as you already said, gone through hosting a podcast series. I understand the fun and the pain of going through the producing such a series, and I've any opportunity to share that and encourage others to do it, very, very welcome. So my name is Guy Ellis. I'm a coach, a consultant, a trainer, facilitator for typically senior leaders, but I also do a lot of pro bono work with young people, and particularly in my background in human resources, with young professionals, HR professionals as well. My background, I'm an immigrant. I came to the UK when I was 21. I had a relatively successful career. It feels like such a long time ago, but at one point I was the youngest HR manager, HR director in London. So I was an HRD when I hit 29. Which I know sounds impressive, but a combination of being in the right place at the right time and a real focus on acquiring and gaining the skills and the knowledge was what was the key drivers to get to me that point. I've spent the last, believe it or not, 20 plus years working for my own business. A lot of project management, a lot of interim management. I've been lucky enough to do a range of change projects, a lot of restructurings, implementation of policy procedures, a bit of interim HRD work. And about 15 years ago, I realized that clients were keeping me on, after I finished my project, delivered what I needed to deliver. Because they welcome, they seem to really value my advice, that sort of New Zealand practical, down to earth, tell it like I see it, non-judgmental advice, and the opportunity just to hear them. So about 15 years ago, I started coaching, as an accident. And while I've had a pretty successful interim and intern, consultant, self-employed consultant, COVID came along. My business, just fell apart. I worked for the NHS for a bit. For personal reasons, I decided to do a lot of facilitation, a lot of training. I do a lot of work with soft skills and the CIPD. And a couple of years ago, I didn't want to go back to that quite depressing sometimes change, especially the restructurings, which I'd found myself, and started to really develop my coaching business. And since then, it's been a chance and opportunities to keep building that business.
I love it. You come from a very interesting background, and that's one thing I'm learning in interviewing coaches. Coaches have such a very interesting background. It's like there's always a great origin story behind it and how they got to that point, which is Very interesting. And obviously, you work with leaders. It's really impressive that you were able to be a HRD at such a young age. Because I know when I picture HR directors, I picture elderly
Old
people.
people, yeah.
So that is super impressive. Let's dive into this podcast because I'm super curious about it. Like the name, Leadership Inside Out.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, why did you decide to start the podcast?
I mean, getting new clients is tough.
Mm,
Once you've got them, looking after them is the easy part. It's the fun part of the job. Getting new clients, I make no pretense. I'm at the upper end of charges, of costs, and it's a huge investment for clients to want to, spend time and money with me. I offer a 3 month, no quibble return. So you do what you can, but I recognize that potential clients are taking a big risk, investing money for their own personal benefits, but still in me. So the podcast came out of the recognition that I needed to create an avenue, a channel where people could see what I was like in action.
mm,
Um, and uh, it seemed like a natural thing. I wasn't comfortable talking to camera. Oddly enough, that's changed, and I'm just about to, literally this last week launched a new Instagram account where I'm giving, weekly advice and little shorts on, various leadership topics and so forth. But at the time, I felt very uncomfortable just talking to camera, and so and my style is very eclectic. So I don't follow a routine. I don't follow a format. So a podcast seemed like a perfect opportunity where, the guest would do most of the talking. I'd ask a few questions, and those questions would vary depending on what the guest, gave me in terms of answers. And it was a showcase for my own skills. So that was the sort of starting point. Leadership Inside Out came not without a lot of thinking, honestly.
mm.
For lots of personal reasons. I had an interesting background, upbringing, and whenever things are tough or were tough, when I was in my career, I'd always, my first thought would be, well, it's not as bad as. So I'd reflect on, the fact that I'd immigrated, sort of my upbringing, and to myself say, look, it's not great at the moment, doesn't feel great, but I've done this before. I've survived worse than this, and so that sort of thinking that whereas most leadership models start with what is the skills you need, what's the context, my starting point is always what have I learned already? What can I draw upon as inspiration? What can I draw upon in terms of skills? Maybe not in leadership, but in my life. And that just really resonated with my guests. The fact that all of us have been on journeys. Someone might look at me, think, white, male, middle-aged, almost, and know nothing about me at all. And so I wanted to sort of get across this point that, while we may look okay on the outside, while we may, it can be very easy to judge us from the outside, actually, all of us have been through our tough times and overcome some really tough barriers, and we've learned from that. So it was a natural, leadership inside out, starting from the inside and using that to build that and how we respond going forward to others.
I love it.
Long-winded answer, but
I love it though. I love it. I love the thought that went through into putting, coming up with the name because I think that is super important as well. And I think that's something that, kind of shapes the podcast as well and the conversations. Really, really cool. Speaking of guests, yeah, and I love that the idea came from, one, you trying to use it to as a business development kind of thing, and also help showcase your coaching skills. That's exactly what we preach over here. So I really love that. Speaking of the guests, though, how do you? We're talking earlier, and you said that you reached out to like 1,000 people or something like that. So how did you determine what type of guests to interview, and how to go about that?
Um, I think I'll be honest. I reached out to 1,000 of my LinkedIn contacts
Mm,
just with a very heartfelt message,
mm,
which said essentially what I've already told you. 200 people came back to me with affirmations. Um, once we'd been through the process of sending them the material, we got around 50 or 60 people who said yes. For a variety of reasons, we just got overwhelmed. We stopped asking because I thought maybe 10 people would be great. We have 50 or 60 people saying absolutely want to be part of this. And without any pushing, we ended up with 20.
mm,
Um, and I didn't want to self-select,
mm,
I'm not, it wasn't, immigrants or skin color or gender. It literally was, if you have a story to tell, my job is to help bring out the things you've overcome. And that's what's been really amazing about it is that these people, you can't tell from the outside what
mm,
these people have been through. And I mean, I've learned so much. It's been a wonderful, humbling experience. And I've ticked all the boxes in terms of the diversity agenda. I don't frankly care because that wasn't the point. The point was to tell people that actually we're all different, we're all unique, and we've all overcome our own barriers and our own, problems to get where we are. And the greatest majority of people, okay, self-selected, are really happy with who they are and they're really happy with their journey. And they wanted to share those barriers and those issues that they overcame. They wanted to tell young people, people going through those sorts of issues, that it was okay, and that they could, they will get through this.
mm. I love it. I love it. And the response actually is something that I'm so like obviously I do it on my end, but it's amazing when you invite people for podcasts. The response is always mostly overwhelmingly yes. So that not necessarily surprised me, but that number is it's a lot, man. 200 people and managing that. That's the thing. A lot of people don't understand that the podcast, first of all, nobody's necessarily asking them to come on podcasts like that. So you're probably one of the first people to do that, and being a part of giving them an opportunity to share their story as well is something they find valuable. Really awesome. So how would you say the experience has been so far since launching the show to now? What has that been like for you?
I mean, I've loved it. I mean, we stopped it at 20 simply because we were going to go out once a month.
Mm,
Then we are going to go out once every 2 weeks, and then we went out every week,
mm,
just because we were overwhelmed with people. I've got a great team that sits behind me. They do all the hard work. I just make sure I press the right button at the right time, and I just talk to people. So I've got the really easy job. But you can see the branding. We've got all that sort of stuff. It's not difficult once you've got the right people in place. They do all of that sort of stuff. Um, and the whole experience has just been overwhelmingly positive.
mm,
Was I looking for clients? Not directly. I mean, yes, as a a showcase for my skills, I didn't pick people because they might be clients. I picked people who wanted to share their stories. Um, the follow up, I've been following up with the 20 people, and because the feedback has been so good. They've really loved the podcast. They've really loved my style. I've now got 20 advocates out there who are, telling me that they will pass on, my details. They will pass on the experience. They shared it. You know, I was looking at some of the stats. I had 20 people over that period. What was it? We were looking at around 20,000 impressions on LinkedIn, certainly 5+ thousand views.
Mm.
Um, I mean, that's just amazing. Um, and, is it a short term? Am I going to see business tomorrow? Probably not. Is it a long term? Absolutely. Has it allowed me to develop new skills? I was here talking, I've got an Instagram, series going out, leadership, inside out, unfiltered, going out, went out this week, so that confidence that I gained from talking to camera, the leadership inside out brand, it was podcast. Now it's unfiltered because it's me giving advice from the heart around typical issues. So I've got a nice little branding, coming out of it. It's all been really, really positive. And I enjoyed it immensely.
I love it. I love how, excuse me, I love how you've benefited, you've seen so much ROI, like positive ROI from hosting this podcast. Because I know a lot of coaches I speak to, there's a lot of well, do I want to say skepticism about podcasting and all that. So that is great to hear that this is, the experience has been awesome for you. One of the big concerns coaches have about I speak to have about podcasts is the timing, the time, the time, how much time, how time consuming podcasting is. How have you managed to fit this podcast into what I assume is a very busy schedule?
It's absolutely not busy. I mean, if I didn't have anyone doing the editing, doing
Mm,
the marketing, it could be quite painful. I'm
mm,
I'm sure, but for me, it's an hour per podcast, and that's
mm,
it. I mean, I don't follow a script.
mm.
I send people a list of questions. Thanks, Abby, for the questions you sent. But I don't follow the questions personally. I make it very clear that I follow where the
The
guest wants to
conversation.
go. So in terms of my time, it's an
Mm,
hour per guest. Nothing, and it's an enjoyable hour. I
mm,
mean, you're coaching for free, but it's marketing. So no, don't get me wrong. It, it- I needed someone like my team
mm,
support me. It's not you just can't do a podcast. I've got intro, I've got sound. On LinkedIn, I do, 2 or 3 intro, teasers for upcoming podcasts. We launch it properly, so every podcast has up to 5 linked posts associated with it. I stick it on YouTube. I put it on the audio version on available on Apple. I think we've got it one of the versions. So that does take time. My team happen to be located in India, where the costs are not as much as they might be in other countries. Um, but for me personally, it's no fuss at all.
That's brilliant. That is brilliant because that is one of the big concerns about this. And I also I love how, that whole you gain confidence
That's
from that is so true because that's one of the big issues as well. They're like, I don't want to put myself out there like that, but then when you start, just have a conversation, like you said, just ask questions. Because that's me. I hate, not that I hate, I don't like being on camera like that, but with being a podcast host, it's easier. I could just ask a question and listen.
yeah.
so, so I can see how that is benefit, how that came about for that. So it's also allowed you to start, doing the shorts, the video shorts which is also very beneficial as well. Very, very interesting. And speaking of, is this something you intend to continue going forward, or is it what's the future plans for the podcast?
Um, so feature plans are very much on an Instagram run.
Okay.
So I've got 40 episodes, running.
Mm,
They'll be once a week, and with that, I've got tools and quotes and all sorts of, little things that go with that. So that's the focus at the moment. Absolutely want to come back to the podcast. Just because I enjoy it so much, it's sort of almost, if I get nothing from it, just the chance to learn and develop skills, and gain that confidence is too good an opportunity to miss. And it's humbling listening to people's stories. That's, one of the reasons I really have focused on coaching is because it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be part of people's journeys and to even give them the smallest bit of help on their ways. So, um, why not do it in a podcast where others can see and can gain comfort and confidence in your style and the way that you come across?
I love it. I love it. This has been a powerful. This is absolutely what what I was expecting, actually. Guy, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you about this, seeing how beneficial and how much you've enjoyed doing the podcast. It brings joy to me because that's pretty much what we do over here. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if any of our viewers would like to learn more about your coaching practice, talk to you about even the podcast, and even like what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, my website, guyellis.net. They can contact me on, guy@guyellis.coach. My LinkedIn profile seems to be, carrying on and doing well. I've doubled number of contacts over the last year. I'm up over 4,000 now, and
Oh,
a lot of that is due to the work I've been doing with the podcast
oh,
and other things. But so I'm available, contactable. Obviously, this is going out to coaches, so they're not going to want their own coaching necessarily. I'm a great believer that all coaches should have a coach, but that's not always
the case.
the case with many of my colleagues. But just happy to talk to people. I focus on executive women. A lot of my clients, a lot of my background has been working for very senior women in my background. I seem to have an affinity and a way of connecting, and bringing a male perspective seems to add real value. Especially in environments where they're surrounded by a lot of men. But I'm open to opportunities, and this world is small but large, and it's about helping each other, to be successful and to achieve our life goals.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a huge fan of collaborating, and maybe that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast as well, because it allows me to connect with so many people. Guy, this has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for doing it. I truly appreciate it.
No, Zabby, thank you. It's been a real joy, and as I'm sure you know, well, maybe you don't. If you're a podcast host, actually, my belief it should be a 90-10 or even less. So 10% of the time spent speaking. So it's a joy to be on the 90% side for once. So and thank you.
Thank you so much.